Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever in the world you may be joining us from today. My name is Francesco Del Carpio, and I am the CFL York Operations Coordinator. I would like to officially open the fifth session of the Drones for Public Health, Safety, Risk, Humanitarian, and Emergency Management Speaker Series, presented in partnership with York University's Advanced Disaster and Emergency Rapid Response Lab and the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology's Center for Innovation and Research in Unmanned Systems. I would like to begin today's session with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territory upon which our campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. The area is known as Tikaranto and has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that the territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. As this is an online event, our participants may be joining from various locations, so I strongly encourage you to learn about the traditional land upon which you are located. With this, I welcome our moderator, our speaker, and our participants from around the world. Welcome to our webinar. I would now like to introduce our moderator for today, Michelle Arif. Michelle is a research staff and geospatial analyst at the Center for Innovation and Research in Unmanned Systems, or CIRUS, at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. She holds a master's degree in disaster and emergency management from Royal Roads University, as well as an applied bachelor's in geographic information systems from SAIT and an undergraduate degree from the University of Toronto. Her research interests focus on how climate change influences disaster patterns and how emerging technologies such as drones can aid in disaster mitigation efforts. Additionally, Michelle actively volunteers with the Canadian Red Cross, contributing to the emergency response team and personal disaster assistance programs. Michelle, thank you very much for moderating today's session and your ongoing support throughout this series. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Francesco. Good morning to everyone that's joining us here today, and thank you for taking the time to learn with us from various time zones, as mentioned. We have an excellent speaker lined up for today's session, which I'm very excited to introduce. But before I do, I'd like to go over some housekeeping notes. As Francesco mentioned, I'll be the moderator, which includes moderating the chat box. This is now open, and I encourage all communal dialogue. Feel free to say hello, where you're joining us from. We also have a Q&A box at the bottom, which I will be monitoring throughout this webinar. And feel free to throw in your questions as Wade goes through many topics, and we'll address them at the end of the session. So our speaker today, as I just mentioned, is our very own Wade Hawkins. He is an accomplished professional with an extensive background in geospatial and remotely piloted aircraft systems, RPAS, or better known as drone technology, in education research spanning over 28 years. Over the course of his career, Wade has been at the forefront of numerous groundbreaking applied research and development initiatives, collaborating closely with industry partners as well as government and non-governmental agencies. Currently serving as the research chair at the Center for Innovation and Research in Unmanned Systems at Southern Alberta Institute of Technology in Calgary, Alberta, Wade leads a dynamic team of professionals, including me. This team includes principal investigators, research technicians, advanced drone pilots, and geospatial experts. Together, they focus on integrating drones, sensors, and analytics to address the applied needs for their clients. Outside of his professional commitments, Wade is actively engaged in volunteering. He serves as a board member for both the Fernie Trails Alliance and the Western Sky Land Trust, demonstrating his dedication to environmental and community causes. Despite his busy schedule, Wade prioritizes spending quality time with his family, enjoying outdoor activities like mountain biking, wake surfing, and skiing. Without further ado, the floor is yours, Wade.
Thanks, for Michelle for the introduction and opening up the session, Francesco, and welcome everybody. I'm just going to start my slide deck. All right, Michelle, you can see my screen in presentation mode?
Yes.
Excellent. Perfect. All right, thanks. And yeah, as part of my bio introduction, I do have to give full credit to my team. So obviously I'm leading the Center for Innovation and Research on Unmanned Systems, but I've got a fantastic team of, as Michelle, a number of folks that really make this happen. So kudos to them for supporting the development of what we're calling CIRUS and the title Environmental Resiliency Sustainability Hub. So again, my name is Hawkins. I'm going to speak to ERSH, or the Environmental Resiliency Sustainability Hub, and just focusing on challenges and celebrating achievements. I'm not going to go through like a specific slide. I'm just going to talk to these challenges and achievements and successes as I go through the presentation. So just to start with, just a little bit of background about who we are. So SAIT is the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and career programs in technology, trades, and business. So it is Calgary's second oldest post-secondary institute and Canada's first publicly funded technical institute. Inside of SAIT, we have what we call the Applied Research and Innovation Services. So that's a separate research division within SAIT. Unlike some other institutes, our researchers are funded for research. We're not teaching and researching. Our focus is on research only. So we're not being spread too thin by having to teach and to incorporate research into the operations. Within CIRUS, we are one research center, and I'll speak to the other research centers. We are the Center for Innovation and Research in Unmanned Systems. So we have two focus areas. One is applied research. So really working with companies to support their research needs. And the companies could be industry, could be small to medium size, could be larger players. We have lots of partnerships with government, non-governmental agencies, nonprofits, Indigenous communities, of quite a broad range of partnerships. And we focus a lot of effort on maintaining those partnerships because that's the key to moving all this important work forward. On the applied research side, we focus on remotely piloted systems. So it could be aquatic, terrestrial, or airborne. I would say 90% of our work is on the airborne side of things. We incorporate advanced sensors, and I'll speak to those shortly, analytical framework, and then information dissemination. And throughout all of that, we have lots of focus on regulations, the collection of data, the management, analysis, and dissemination. We also offer a 3-week training program on leveraging or learning about the drones in our lab, like you can see behind me, and I'll speak to that shortly. We do have other schools. So one of the benefits of working at SAIT is we could leverage all these other schools, both from a faculty standpoint, so having faculty come to work with us at CIRUS, or students. So leveraging capstone students, which are final project students, or practicum students to come work with us, which is a great ability. We also have other research divisions within CIRUS. So we have the Advanced Manufacturing Materials Lab, we have Clean Unconventional Technology Solutions, and we have Green Building Technology Access Center. In addition, we have what's called our independent scientists, and they take a lot of the work that doesn't fit into the 4 research centers, and they do a lot of work on with us as well on the methane detection side of things. The Advanced Manufacturing Materials, we will often partner with them if we need to integrate a new sensor into our drone. So creating some sort of manufacturing need to be able to mount the drone to the drone. And then we do a lot of water quality, water quantity, and soil assessments, and we would do that through our Clean and Conventional Technology Solutions. So we do have quite a good variety of capabilities within SAIT itself. Brings us to the hub. So what we've done is built a center to come to collaborate. So really, we're trying to position it as an organization or a hub, a location to really enhance Canada's disaster resilience and serve as a global model for sustainable and inclusive environmental management practices. So really, it's local. So we're working with City of Calgary. We're dealing with provincial agencies like the Government of Alberta, all the industries, and then we're also reaching out across Canada to other organizations, and then even going into a global model. So looking at reaching out to organizations in Europe and so that South America, for example, to really broaden the impact of our work. It is a dynamic state-of-the-art research and technology research incubator distinguished by its collaborative approach. So you can see behind me, that's one of our centers or one of our rooms. We also have 2 additional rooms where we bring researchers, students, and industry folks together to talk about methods to solve their problems. Strong emphasis on equity, diversity, and inclusion to make sure that everything is we're taking the holistic approach to make sure that our solutions are going to be culturally sensitive and community driven. I'll give credit to Michelle for this great graphic. So this kind of illustrates what we're trying to do in a really easy to review standpoint. So we have the whole cycle of the 7 steps, but really it distills down to we're choosing the best remotely piloted system and sensor. We're looking at integrating the data that we collect into a high performance computing infrastructure, making sure that it's secure from cybersecurity issues. We're working on the, once we've collected the data in the field, we're working on the analysis and the predictive simulation. So using GIS, remote sensing, machine learning, artificial intelligence, whatever the need is from the client is really where we're focusing on that. And this is where we connect back to some of the other schools. We have our School of Advanced Digital Technology, so we could leverage their knowledge in machine learning and artificial intelligence, for example, to supplement our existing knowledge. So we can actually bring in students or even researchers from that school. And then the last part of it, and this is usually part of the more exciting part of it, is the data discovery or knowledge dissemination. So we build out dashboards, maps, utilize wearables like augmented reality, virtual reality technology to really improve the way that we're all interacting with the data and the ultimate results. A lot of virtual models to try to really simulate what the natural environment looks like in a simulated space. So drawing it back to in that IRSH hub, or the Environmental Resiliency Sustainability Hub, we have great capabilities. We have a dynamic workspace. Room has changed quite a bit from the photo that you see there, but we do have a dynamic workspace, lots of interaction, lots of scrums and discussions with our team. We do foster professionalism. We have great technical knowledge and remote field expertise. We have been out on site at several of our clients' projects, and we take that very seriously. We also maintain confidentiality. FOIP is an important piece, and ethics. The other interesting thing is we satisfy state's safety and professionalism requirements, but we also have to adhere to the clients as well. So if we're going to one of our clients' operations, we have to make sure that we have our own safety procedures, but we're also matching their requirements, and we often exceed the requirements. In addition, that student engagement piece, we also have offer practicums, so 8-month work terms, and we also offer 4-month capstone projects or final projects. And this is just an example of a project that our students did last year. They built a dashboard to support wildfire emergency. And it streamed in data from several different sites, including data that they had created. The student piece, just to finish off on the students. So we try to build what I guess it's termed a pipeline. So we have capstone students working across multiple schools. Then we can bring on practicum students. So usually what happens is the capstone student would then be potentially interested in working on a practicum, and then they may be hired through a practicum position, obviously through a competitive process. And then depending on funding and the project needs, we can potentially hire them as full-time employees here at SAIT or contract employees. And then hopefully at the end of the day, they would get taken by industry. And then we can continue that cycle. So it's really all about funding and project needs throughout each year. But this is a goal that we'd like to see is continually have people coming through this center to try to get into industry and then support the high quality expert pipeline. And then the research results, we also transition back to program curricula in the various schools. So we hopefully have that full loop happening. So just a quick demonstration of our center. So we have lots of remotely piloted systems. This is just an example of some of the multi-rotors. We also have the vertical takeoff and landing. I'll show you an image of the heavy lift, high endurance systems that we also have. We integrate sensors. So we have up to 15 different sensors ranging from, this line includes LiDAR, thermal, multispectral, ground penetrating radar, dual echo sonar, and a thermal sensor. So in addition, we have methane detection, water sampling, hyperspectral sensors. So lots of different sensors to be able to support client needs. We focus on our planning and operations. So again, take this very seriously, make sure that we're working safely, but also we're planning the mission appropriately to support the collection of appropriate data. There's nothing worse than planning everything and then going out into the field, collecting data and realizing that data isn't going to support the data needs. So that's an important consideration. And then lastly, the analytic and dissemination. So utilizing all kinds of tools. And at the end of the day, we want to avoid the challenge of the SD card. So we don't want to just collect a bunch of images that are not going to be utilized by the organization. We want to, from the start, understand how the organization needs to consume the data in their environment. So if that means that we need to take the data and integrate it into their own geophysical software package, we need to do that from the start to make sure that our data will be utilized by the client in an effective and efficient way. Here's just a video of one of our larger drones. So this is out at Morley, Stoney Nakoda Nation. It's now known as Minitini, working on a project with Stoney Nakoda Nation. So it just gives us that ability to transition from smaller drones, giving you that 30 to 45 minute timeline of operations, to this one giving us an endurance of up to 3 hours with approximately 50 to 60 kilogram payload, not including gas. So it gives us that endurance. So when we do look at commercialization, working on some of these projects with partners, we can give them the option to use the smaller drones, or we could transition to this kind of system that would truly give us the endurance that we may need. And it is running a jet turbine and running Jet A fuel. So in a cold environment, it actually does operate very effectively. We're not as worried about battery voltage issues. So very great good use case for several operations. We are SAIT, we are an academic group, so I do have to speak to the training piece, which is important for us as well. So we are offering more and more micro-credential courses. So think of these as smaller 4-day courses or seminar type courses. Things like RPAS flight school, ground school, conducting flight reviews, and then getting into application specifics. So because we're a research division, we don't teach, but we are helping to build curriculum to support School of Transportation, for example, to be able to teach. So we might have, we're developing some courses that relate to, using GPR and drones, looking at water sampling and drones. So just looking at other specific use cases to support building out a bigger knowledge base for people that are interested. Then we have more longer duration courses. So we have a remotely piloted drone aviation training center. So that's a 3-week program. And as you see with the images, the two on the left are in our center. They're a simulation suite where students will learn how to actually operate the drone in simulation before they actually operate the drone. They also do maintenance, a week of maintenance, mission planning, and then they also operate the drones that you see in the pictures. So it's a 3-week fast track program. The expectation is the student moving into this program would already have their advanced pilot certificate, and this is an add-on to those existing skills. There's also the School of Transportation offers a remotely piloted aircraft systems training program. It's a 15-week fast track program where you basically start from very little drone knowledge and training all the way to full pilot and lots of capabilities with BV loss or beyond visual line of sight, and also mapping and the regulatory understanding. And then starting in September, SAIT is offering a 2-year RPAS diploma program. So providing the ability to really immerse yourself into this technology. So really interesting offerings as we move forward. A lot of our projects can only happen through funding, and that's one of the challenges that we speak of is always getting funding to support our projects. But we've been fortunate to have all these funding agencies provide us with the dollars to support what it is we do. So CFI, Canada Foundation for Innovation, Prairies Economic Development Canada, National Sciences and Engineering Council of Canada, then Government of Alberta, and then some specific funders like TransAlta, Nickel Family Foundation, SAIT, and then the University of Calgary has also been gracious in their funding as well. So Lots of funding, and thanks to the funding agencies, they're critical to our work. I'm going to speak just really quickly about relationships. So as I mentioned earlier, our clients are key. So making sure that we're satisfying their needs, making sure we're communicating effectively, and ensuring that we're seeing success from their standpoint and from our standpoint. Being in the aerospace world, we obviously need to make sure that our regulations are sound. So working with groups like Transport Canada to make sure that the larger drones behind me are being operated legally and safely, all the way through to using our sensors as well. We do have, I can recognize one of the earlier speakers, Stephanie Lapointe. She's been our regulatory backbone, so really focusing on the relationship with Transport Canada. And then the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, or ISED, they focus on the spectrum management. So when we are using the larger drones and we're going into sites to work with our drones, we have to make sure that our spectrum is legal and it's not going to be interfering with any other operational systems out there. Also, when we use technology like ground penetrating radar, we have to make sure that we are not impacting any other spectrums out there. So that's a really important part of our communication procedures. And then moving into things like the BARS, the Basic Aviation Risk Standard Association. So making sure that as we progress through our daily workflow, that we're collecting all the required information and making sure that we have our checklists in place, we have our procedures in place, and we're following those. And BARS is out of Australia. It's more focused on the piloted aviation side of things, but they are starting to make an impact in Canada. And we're just keeping our ear to the ground on how that's going to impact drone operation in the future. And now I just want to speak to some of the projects that relate directly to the topic. So the first one I'll speak to is the digital health technology. So really focused on delivery, but not just delivery. That's pretty straightforward to deliver supplies. We have a slightly different edge or angle to our project. Great partnerships with the W21C, University of Calgary, Alberta Health Services. We have Stoney Nakoda Nation, the telementoring network through Jessica McKee, Stoney Nakoda Nation community, and then the World Health Organization has been interested in this project as well. So first thing we delivered successfully was personal protective equipment. So PPE delivery, pretty straightforward, just delivery of face masks, shields, gowns, and gloves. This is kind of in that COVID time period. And then we successfully delivered COVID test kits and had the fidelity assessed. So we delivered COVID test kits out to site, returned them to the facility, and then the lab had a control sample, and they determined that there was no degradation to the samples during flight of the drone. And we written up the American Journal of Infection Control for the result of that project, which was great. This project continued over the last 3 years, or continues over the last 3 years, and we transitioned to the remote communication support. So what we're calling telementoring. It's nothing new. So it's been our partner in this is Dr. Andrew Kirkpatrick, trauma surgeon at the University of Calgary Foothills Hospital, and Jessica McKee, who is our technical guru. It's really taking a lot of Dr. Kirkpatrick's work for 20 years of applying telementoring, and also the telementored ultrasound in space, for example. There's been a lot of examples. On the right there, there's a picture of Dr. Kirkpatrick getting into a little airplane. But really it's focusing on using the drone to deliver the payload, and then the payload is deployed to the patient. And then we have 3 primary areas that we're focusing on, which is medical devices, emergency medical treatment, and there's actually 2 of those. So one would be a stop the bleed kit, and one is a start the breathe kit. So we're basically leveraging what's already been done out there and incorporating that into the drone delivery process. And so, for example, here's one early proof of concept where we actually had the drone with a payload container, and it was sent to a simulated patient in the backcountry of Kananaskis in Alberta. Payload was delivered, and then you'll see shortly the person opens up the payload container. There will be a little tripod that she placed her phone on, and she is telementored or taught on how to stop the bleed. So if she had a deadly bleed, how to use a gauze, a clamp, and a tourniquet. And in the image in a second, in the video, you'll see her applying a skin clamp to a prosthetic. So, and the phone there has the physician telementoring her on how to apply that. And on the left, you see Dr. John Connolly, who is an infectious disease doc who's been part of the project since day one. And again, we're written up in the Helion journal for this work. Then we transition to remote ultrasound, so medical devices. So again, similar to the last one, sent the medical device to a simulated patient. He was able to unpack the payload, connect to the mentor, and then completed an ultrasound examination of all the relevant anatomic areas. This was done back in the COVID days because one of the triggers of COVID was water in the lung. So we wanted to see if we can do that as part of a diagnosis in the field. And then transitioning to what we're working on now is medical devices and treatments, and it's a Start the Breathe kit. So respiratory stress is a big issue, and it's really a heightened level of carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. So what we're doing is asking people out in the community, what is your responsibility to help someone that is dying from acute respiratory distress, right? If someone is dying, either stop the bleed. Do you have the support to be able to stop that deadly bleed? What if somebody's dealing with a collapsed lung because they were riding a horse or they were at a remote access site and they fell over and were impaled based on something on the ground? What could you do? So what we want to do is, and what we're actually operationalizing is, we have somebody that calls in to a dispatch center. Traditionally, they would use an ambulance, and that's still going to be an important player in this. But if the ambulance can't get to that site, then this is where we hope that the drone can play a role, and then it would deliver the medical supplies to the patient. Air ambulance will still be very important, but these are scenarios where they may not be able to get there because of accessibility issues. And so this is an early image of Dr. Andy Kirkpatrick doing telementoring. And the idea we would, for this Start the Breathe, we're developing a custom kit that includes oxygen saturation, respirations, ultrasound, and a blood pressure cuff, all self-administered. They do a remote ultrasound, and then they do a chest tube intubation to basically save themselves in the case of respiratory distress. And we have successfully done that. So here's a picture of our drone, an early image with the kit contents, and we're using colored bags, textured bags, labels to make sure that the payload container is accessible. You see there on the right of my cursor, it's our mannequin is called Sherwood because it's basically built out of Sherwood hockey sticks. We've amped it up to using an actual mannequin now to improve the simulation. And here's just a real quick video. I'll just speak to the audio, but somebody places a distress call. This is actually in the back of our Sprinter, so it was very early days. The drone gets connected to a payload through a winch mechanism. The drone is sent out based on the X and Y location of a cell phone. And the whole process of this project is the whole cycle. So how do we extract the cell phone coordinates from a patient that's in distress? And then this is just, again, a simulation of the drone payload being deployed. And then what's happening here is in this case, we have a person that's a lay person that's not injured, and he's actually completing the self-exam. And so what has happened, he's talking to the mentor, and the mentor is teaching him or telling him how to actually do the ultrasound. And here's a person actually running through a full chest tube intubation where he's actually doing a 3-centimeter incision. He's inserting the chest tube line into the lung cavity, for example. And so what we're doing now is we've had a number of additional iterations of this where we refined our procedures, and we're continuing to refine the communication protocols to reduce the amount of time it takes for this to happen. So that's the current status of that project. And then the last part of this one that speaks to the emergency response is if we're going to an area where there's an injury, but let's say there's a train derailment. Well, we don't want to send medical supplies in there if there's a hazardous situation at play. So what we've done is we've built an emergency management drone system where we could send an emergency management drone to that location to gather situational awareness. So we would stream visual, infrared or thermal, and multi-gas. to our command center. Once we've determined that it's a safe environment, then we could then send the medical delivery drone with either just the start the breathe kit, or we can have all the tools in addition to defibrillator, rattlesnake antivenom, whatever we feel is necessary. The gas detection, that would be a scenario if the train derails and there's an ammonium spill. Well, we want to make sure that it's not a hazardous environment. So we would send in the drone first and then follow that up based on the medical delivery drone. So it's in some cases, a two-phased approach. Transitioning quite a bit to some of our other application areas. So wildfire mitigation, tactical response, and management emergency response. So working with Alberta Wildfire to look at wildfire mitigation. So looking at pre-wildfire events. So how do we use our technology to look at risk classes? We're not building risk models. We're supporting existing models with better quality data and new data. We're looking at digital twins to look at where are the communities, where are the values at risk, and how do they interact with potential fires. We're also moving into the tactical response where we're working collaboratively with the incident command system. And that's a key piece. We don't want to have incidents like the drone strike of the Quebec water bomber. We want to be coordinated with the incident command system to make sure that we're integrating drones into the airspace safely. And then lastly, once a wildfire does occur, how could drones be utilized to conduct site reconnaissance, for example, AI-based reforestation activities, and even looking at building a collaborative international wildfire knowledge sharing framework. So really bring the professionals together in a facility like ours to really share the knowledge. Similar to what we just spoke to, we're also working on site reclamation and reforestation projects. So this is an interesting one. This is partnered with NAITS, the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology's Boreal Forest Plant and Seed Technology Access Center. So the environmental resiliency piece is interesting because what they're doing, as you see based on number 2, is they're using what's called a hitchhiker technology. So they're not just planting one seedling per seed pot. They're actually doing multiple seedlings, so 3 seedlings, and one would be a hardwood, so a slower burning seedling. So creates a more biodiverse stand, and it also can help to reduce wildfire risk because with an integration of hardwoods into the forest, that's going to be a slower burning tree. And then they're also looking at using water pearls. So this is an RHST Industries patent where we actually place the water pearls on the seedling and they can reduce water evaporation up to 90%. Both in the greenhouse and in the field. And then the recycled cow manure pots, number 4, that's a way to reduce plastics, accelerate seedling growth and resiliency, and focus on that circular economy. So that's all greenhouse-based operations. And then we come into play where we look at the planting and the reclamation activities through a digital twin. So where should we plant different species based on slope, aspect, hillshade, soil types? We would use a drone to actually send the seedlings to the planter instead of having the planter walk back and forth to the refrigeration vehicle. And then we're using drones and AI to automatically locate seedlings once they've been planted. So creating a baseline. And then we're doing what's called MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification of each seedling using things like LiDAR, multispectral, and visual sensors to document the growth of the seedling over the years to see just how much success these organizations are seeing. Switching gears again, we're focusing on drought and flood monitoring. So leveraging a lot of our other technology to support this. So things like bathymetry, so looking at water depth with ground penetrating radar. And that's not a normal use case. Usually it's more of a sonar-based system, but we're looking at how could ground penetrating radar be used to support bathymetric monitoring. Also snow water equivalency. So looking at depths and density of snow in the mountains and looking at in using those estimates to improve the flood monitoring and the drought monitoring models. And that would be using ground penetrating radar and LiDAR to do that. The list of images on the bottom, this is the Bow River, and we use GPR to measure the bottom of the river system and then built an algorithm to automatically pick the bottom of the river system using the reflectance ratio. So looking at using, in some cases, traditional techniques, but also looking at new innovative techniques to do some of this work. This is a video of more of a traditional technique using a drone. So this is a bathymetric session. So looking at a dual echo sonar where the drone dips the sonar into the water and then it drags it along the water to understand the depth of the water body. As you can see, some of the challenges is it could be very slow. And if you're dragging something like that through the water, what if it hits debris, right? It could be an issue. So a lot of the challenges are, how do we do this effectively and safely? So coming up with techniques like, instead of dragging it, do a leapfrog where it's an interpolation. So we dip it every 20 meters, for example. It all depends on how deep, how much the accuracy of the data. We also do water quality using drone-based water quality assessments and water sampling as well. And then one of the last topics I'll speak to is avalanche mitigation or management mitigation. So looking at building predictive avalanche models to support, where and how much volume will slide down a particular slope. The images at the top there would be a transceiver to find a lost person in an avalanche scenario from a drone. And then lastly, I'll just play this video. We're working on an avalanche mitigation project with several partners. And this was a trial out in Pemberton. This is with Stinson Aerial out of Vancouver Island. And we're using, in this case, we're using the Flycart 30 to transport and drop a simulated payload. It was inert explosives. It's a 20-kilogram bag, and we flew it up to a ridge, and we had to target a very specific location to demonstrate that we could use avalanche control systems to manage avalanche control. And so we place it right on the spot where they were expecting. And what we're transitioning to is now moving into an opportunity where we actually use live munitions, so live active dynamite to support avalanche control activities. We also incorporated LiDAR. So looking at how could LiDAR play a role to improve our location of explosives. So for example, using LiDAR, you'll see it in a second, to generate a model of cornice dimensions. So how high are the cornices? How long are the cornices? What's the density of the snow if we also incorporate GPR? So looking at incorporating sensors in addition to the delivery of the explosive systems. And that's dropping it. And here's just that LiDAR point cloud that was generated from an Emescent LiDAR system. And the idea would be utilizing this in a real-time fashion to help plan the location of our explosive control mechanisms. And the challenge is, most of you, if you're in the drones, in the analytical side, LiDAR data is quite voluminous. So it is a challenge to process it fast enough to be able to use it in a real-time fashion. So we'll be exploring onboard processing capabilities to support the opportunities. The other thing we did was, it's important to be able to see where and what slides. So looking at a comparison of the visual sensor and the thermal sensor. So on each side, we've got the infrared sensor on the left and the visual sensor on the right. And we wanted to see if we can see the avalanche paths at nighttime. And obviously on the right side, can't really see much, but you can actually see quite a bit through the infrared sensor. So what we learned was, moving forward, IR will be a really important piece as we start to conduct avalanche control opportunities. Because as you can imagine, in the winter, it's dark all the way till 8:30 in some cases. So we want to make sure that we're still controlling it, but seeing where the actual slide occurred. And here are some of the partners: Sarah, the NIST, Emescent, Vision Tech, SAIT, and Stinson Aerial Services. So it's been a great project. And that's it. So I just wanted to give you a quick rundown of some of the things that we're working on from an emergency management standpoint, and wanted to provide enough time for some questions. So over to you, Michelle.
Great. Thank you so much, Wade. Covered a lot there. So I think there will be some questions. There were some that popped up while you were talking, so I guess we could start with those. And if anyone has any other questions, feel free to pop them in either the communal dialogue box or the Q&A box, either works. The first question that came up was when you were talking earlier about payloads, and that was from Jeffrey asking if we have a nuclear radiation detection payload for plants, power generation stations, etc. So I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, there's in that case, you're probably going to be looking at more of a terrestrial based system like a ground robot. So when I was in Ontario, I was talking to the Ontario Power Group, and they're actually using ground-based robotic systems like the robotic dog with a sensor that can actually detect that type of contaminant. So yes, there are sensors. That's not in our wheelhouse of expertise, but they are doing that as we speak to monitor nuclear contaminants, I guess. And you should be able to utilize the same sensor on an airborne platform and fly it over a facility to verify if there's been any leaks or any contaminants. We focus mostly on methane and multi-gas, but not on the nuclear side. But it is happening.
Perfect, thank you. The other topic that came up, I don't know if you want to go back to the slide about the RPAS diploma program. Something that you had mentioned earlier, the certificate program as well. There were some questions about that. I think there's interest in possibly signing up or participating in that. So if you could just speak a bit more detail, about this one here. So there's the 2-year RPAS diploma. Is that still under development, or is that being offered at the moment?
It's in development as we speak, and the first intake will start in September of 2025, I believe.
So if anyone's looking at signing up right now to learn and get licensed in RPAS, what would you recommend?
I'm not sure if it's available for registration at this point in time. What I could do is I could look into that, and then I could maybe forward it on to you, Michelle, if you want to take their names and then follow up. But it should be available soon, from what I understand. But I'll follow up with Michelle on that.
Yeah. The School of Transportation's 15-week certificate program came up as well, being offered in the summer intake from May to August, and in the fall from September to December. Do you work closely with them, or can you speak to that one as well?
Yeah, we work closely with the group. Yeah, it's usually offered in the summer and in the fall. I'm not sure, you'll have to speak to the School of Transportation about the next intake. So there will be a summer intake. I'm not sure if there will be a fall intake if they also start the diploma program, but for sure there would be summer intakes of the 15-week program. But again, that's something we can report out on because they're managed by the School of Transportation. Us and corporate training at SAIT are managing the remotely piloted drone aviation training center. And then School of Transportation is managing the 2 other courses. And the micro-credential offerings will be a mixture of professional studies, corporate learning, corporate training, CIRUS, and the School of Transportation.
Perfect. And then speaking about the pipeline that you mentioned, the pathway to commercialization, for someone that's already completed the 15-week program, can you elaborate on the 3-week program that's offered afterwards? So
so the 3-week program would be students would come in with their advanced pilot certificate and some experience, and they would spend time learning about the larger systems like that one that you see there in NVIDIA HT100. So understanding the maintenance requirements, because the maintenance needs of a larger jet fuel drone are obviously a lot higher than just simply battery power. So you talk about what is the maintenance schedule like from this kind of drone, right? We could talk basic and intermediate maintenance, and we even get into advanced maintenance. Now, the students don't take advanced maintenance, but at least they understand what is required. And then they have, so it's approximately a week of each. So a week of maintenance training and understanding just the system itself. Then we do about a week of mission planning. So looking at how do you actually plan missions to support different sensors on these particular systems. And then there's also the flight training. So we would have them operate in simulation for a certain number of hours. We can incorporate some emergency procedures to make sure that they're comfortable with the operation. That Boeing system, that would be just your generic flight simulation seat. But once they have some understanding of operating a drone in simulation or an aircraft in simulation, then they would use the same ground control station that would be used for the helicopter. And then we have some smaller helicopters that they would learn to operate with outside. Once they're comfortable with the smaller helicopters, then they transition to the bigger system. So it's very much a stepwise approach from a simulation all the way to the larger system. So it's a pretty fast 3-week program, but you get to that point where you learn how to operate these bigger systems.
Mm-hmm. And this builds on top of the 15-week program that you mentioned earlier, right? There isn't much overlap, I think.
No, because a 15-week program, they focus on several different systems. So they have things like the Wingtra, which is a vertical takeoff and landing. They have some of the DJI. They have a confined space drone. So they have a lot of really great products, but they don't transition to these drones that are greater than 25 kilograms. So our focus is it could be a bolt on to the remotely piloted aircraft systems course.
Mm-hmm. So one then the other.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Lots of questions about getting certified. Another question came up. How easy or complicated is it for you to get a special flight permission to fly larger drones and beyond visual line of sight?
I never want to say it's easy. It's and what's called the SORA. Now, with that said, it's imperative that the client knows the contents of those documents. So we will help them, but ultimately have to take ownership of the documentation. So it's a fairly straightforward application. However, you need the knowledge to be able to understand what you're actually putting in to the application. You need to understand the limitations and the considerations of your drone as well. And you also need to understand where are you flying and what type of sensor. So there's a lot that goes into it, but there are people out there that will help people that are starting to go down that road to develop the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
And the regulations are changing in 2025. But again, if an election happens, who knows if that will be pushed back. But in theory, it will help to streamline BVLOS approval in more rural settings, right? It's not going to be any easier flying over Calgary, Edmonton. But if you're in an area where there is less ground risk and G-class airspace, it should be a little bit less daunting to get permission to run beyond visual line of sight.
Mm-hmm. And probably a bit more complicated in the city of Toronto, I assume.
Very much so, very much so. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, we've got lots of good questions coming in here. So another one, and if you want to add to anything you've said before about, you can do that as well. But what business cases do you see the bigger machines really flourishing in, and what project parameters would make these drones a beneficial platform? So larger machinery, which areas?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's a lot more complexity, obviously, with the bigger machines from the regulatory standpoint, the maintenance, the management, the communication infrastructure. So, so you do want to make sure that the use case is going to support that, but really things like pipeline integrity. So longer baselines where the drone needs to operate for more than a kilometer, right? So they need to be able to operate in a larger area. Cargo delivery, if that's ever going to take off, that's an area that might be an emerging technology. So parts delivery, cargo delivery. Obviously, we're leveraging it for medical delivery. A lot of the geotechnical work, so things like oil and gas exploration, as it's harder to get permission for mining, for example, as it's harder to get permission to go into areas to explore. it might force organizations to use more remotely piloted systems. And so if you have a larger area that you're trying to survey, using a drone with this kind of endurance is going to be a lot more effective. And so it's getting to that state where, because of the endurance, because of the capabilities, you're almost starting to see a competition between piloted helicopters and these particular helicopters. And in instances where it may not be as safe as you would like, that's where this kind of system would play a bigger role, right? If you think about power line inspection with a helicopter with a pilot, you know, you're getting pretty close to a power line, and you have potentially a pilot and a spotter actually taking photos of the power line. If you could use a drone to do that work, that would be ideal. This project I spoke about in the avalanche control, if you're running a helicopter with pilots and your avalanche control experts are throwing out avalanche control from the helicopter, well, that could be perceived as being somewhat dangerous. So if you can do that with a drone, then you're taking the pilots out of that risk space. And then looking at a comparison of GHG emissions, for example, right? Looking at, and that's part of what we always do, is if we use a helicopter, like a piloted helicopter, like an A-Star, what is the cost per hour? What is the GHG emissions from that particular system compared to a drone-based helicopter platform? And the key message isn't, it's not always going to be cheaper, right? These are still expensive systems. You need 2 people at a minimum to operate. So you have to look at the business case about what is your goal? Is it to improve safety, efficiency, do things that you can't do with a piloted system? Because in some cases it may not be that much cheaper. Some cases it might be, but not all the time.
It's definitely good to know, and definitely have lots of perks. So it's less invasive, safer in most cases. But then of course there's always the cost benefit analysis. So well said.
Yeah, exactly. And even the volume, right? The amount of decibels coming out of a piloted helicopter compared to the drone-based platform is quite significant, lower on the drone. So if you're looking at wildlife surveys, it may not be as intrusive to the animals in the ground.
Yeah, it's a good question. Good answer. Another question has come up, and this is one that I really like because it touches on what I study, but how have you found integrating into the ICS system for a wildfire response? So I guess disaster management, and are people receptive to or resistant to drones encroaching that space of incident command systems?
Yeah, important question. The key is that coordination, right? So anytime we talk about integrating drones into wildfire response, it's like a hard no, absolutely not. But as long as you're offering a coordinated approach and you're speaking with the key players, and you need to have that knowledge of wildfire. You don't want to just go in and just learn about it on the spot. You need to know, what are the different roles in the wildfire community? What is a bird dog, right? What are all these terms? And then the integration is really important to make sure that you have buy-in from the pilots and the fire boss to make sure that you're integrating it in properly. The other important factor is understanding the incursions, right? So if we are working in that space and we're incorporating drones into the communication system, can we track rogue drone operators, right? Because it's a challenge to keep that restricted airspace safe, right? So thinking about technology like radar to be able to look at all the flying machines in the airspace and also understand, okay, which ones are there legally through this coordinated approach and which ones are not legal. And then thinking about, okay, if we do see that there's a smaller drone that's moving into the airspace, how do we work to neutralize that risk? And often it's we ground our drones, we ground the piloted aircraft, but we obviously want to try to prevent that. So as part of our coordinated approach is we're going to be working with the fire crews to integrate that into the system. Lots of interest because more and more people are seeing the value. And it's not even forcing pilot aircraft to lose jobs, right? They can focus their effort on different applications that are more important, and the drones can take on some of the other applications like nighttime monitoring, for example, right? We can have the drone up in the air when the pilot aircraft have been grounded, doing, you know, monitoring of the fire perimeter, for example.
I agree. And if I were to add anything, it would just be that the 3 C's come into play here: the collaboration, cooperation, and communication. Those are 3 major areas. And I don't think most organizations shy away from those 3. It's just more work to kind of implement that. And if you are interested, our last talk with Philip Reed did touch on this. So he was with the Government of Alberta, the Wildfire Risk Management Specialist. And that talk is posted on the CFAL YouTube channel or SATE's channel as well. And it's a good one to catch if you missed session 4.
Yeah, and he's actually one of our partners. So I didn't want to go into too much of what he was talking about, because he's the expert in that. So yeah, he's our go-to when it comes to the wildfire piece. And the interesting thing about wildfire is we're working across the world from a wildfire response standpoint. So it's not just Alberta. We're talking to BC, Ontario, California, Greece, Italy. So looking at a bigger body of knowledge to support our needs.
Perfect. And we're running low on time, but one last quick question was, is the 3-week program that's mentioned on the screen through the School of Transportation?
The 3-week is through continuing education, or they call them the professional studies group at SATE. So if you just type in the remotely piloted drone aviation training center, it should take you to continuing education, and then you can we can provide more details.
And if Francesco wants to jump on for closing remarks, or if Ellie's here, I'll let them do that. But from me, thank you everyone for joining us here today. Thank you, Wade, for the presentation, and I'll let you guys do the closing remarks.
Thanks, Priscilla.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, just quickly, as we're at time, I just want to say thank you, Wade, for that great presentation. And for the great discussions that we had during the Q&A. Thank you, Michelle, as always, for helping us organize and put together the series and the session, and for moderating. And thank you to all of our partners at SATE and at Addison. And thank you as well to everybody in the audience for taking the time to be here, participate, and asking questions. And yeah, I think it was a great session. So thank you all for being here and actively participating. And then just as a reminder, this is still a monthly series. We still have a few sessions left. So our next session is scheduled for March 20th. If you want to mark that on your calendars, share that with anybody in your networks that might be interested in participating or joining. The session is also being recorded, and it will be up on our YouTube channel shortly. So please visit our YouTube channel if you want to revisit the presentation or share it with anyone who couldn't make it today. Yeah, and I think with that, just one last big thank you to everybody. It was a great session. Thank you everyone for taking the time to be here, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.